Podcasts. We all know what they are, and we've all probably listened to one. We're all guilty for listening to our favorite YouTubers or people talk for like an hour. It's human nature to listen to someone that you don't know talk about a topic that you probably don't care about for a really long time. But recently, I feel like there's been too many podcasts. Too many people have bought one of these Shure mics and decided, hey, I'm gonna voice my opinion to people who don't care, and they're gonna be forced to listen to me. Now, I do understand the hypocrisy in this. I do sometimes post videos about things that are my opinion and expect people to care, and most of the time you don't. But recently I've been noticing way more people than usual starting podcasts just to talk to their friends. Now, I do want to preface this video by saying I don't hate podcasts. I do listen to a bunch of them. Those good few being Sleep Deprived, Until They Remove Schlatt, Chuckle Sandwich, Did Schlatt Win, and the Group Chat podcast. So I do listen to some of them, even though most of them include J Schlatt. So I'm not a huge hater of them. But I do hate when people who don't have anything important to say just get a mic, go into a studio, and record a podcast, and talk about whatever they feel like. One prime example of this is the What's Good podcast. I didn't used to listen to them. I now grew up and don't. But the What's Good podcast is a podcast with Mini Minter, who you probably know from the Sidemen, and Randolph, who you probably know from the Sidemen.
Gotta learn to take jokes better, Deji.
Ooh, that is true.
Especially with so cool.
That is true, though. Deji cannot take a joke.
Randolph isn't a member of the Sidemen, by the way. He's just in the videos. The What's Good podcast is basically Mini Mentor and Randolph talk for an hour about things in their life. Things to do with the Sidemen, stuff like that. Things that the viewers could have no knowledge of knowing, but they talk about it. Sometimes they talk about, big topics in the media, like Dream Face revealed once. They talked about it, whatever, normal podcast stuff. But it is essentially just two mates talking to each other. And occasionally they have guests, which are also their friends most of the time. So it's just three friends talking to each other. Now, obviously, I don't think podcasts should have, complete strangers talk to each other, because then it wouldn't be a good podcast. The host wouldn't have any back and forth. But if you're just starting a podcast to talk to your friend, then what the hell? You don't need to do that. Just talk to them. You don't need to voice that online. There is a better example of this. I don't know the name of the podcast, but it is a pretty famous clip. I'll play it for you now.
That's normal here. That's the thing. Like,
but yeah, that's the
back
thing.
in London
normal,
or back in like Oxford or wherever the fucking north of England.
Yeah.
Wherever.
No, not in England.
That would be like the weirdest thing
We went to
ever.
our mate's birthday the other day, and the boys had Lambo and a McLaren, a little McLaren.
That is the definition of, dude, we should start a podcast. Now, a lot of podcasts are harmless. They don't really have an agenda, apart from the ones that do, which are political podcasts. Woo! One podcast I can think of is the Full Send podcast, where you actually have one of the Nelk brothers in the thumbnail of this video. Unless I change it because it got no views. But the Full Send podcast consists of the hosts, the Nelk brothers. If you don't know who they are, that's fine. I had no clue either. They are YouTubers. I don't exactly know what they do. I couldn't be bothered to research it. But you can just search up Nelk brothers on YouTube, or there probably is a pop-up of their channel on the screen. Now, if you don't know who the Nelk brothers is, you probably do know the Full Send podcast for when they had Trump on, or when they had OJ Simpson on. And that podcast was extremely uncomfortable to watch. They tried asking OJ about the murders that he allegedly committed, and it's just so awkward. Just look at this.
Like what? Like who?
Who did it?
People know?
No, I don't know if people know, but somebody knows.
Do you have any way to respond to that? Like if you had to answer who did it?
No, I'm not even going to talk about that.
Yeah.
And when they had Trump on, it also wasn't, the most fluid conversation either. But it was at least less awkward than when they had OJ Simpson. But, there's no harm in listening to the Full Send podcast. You're not wasting any money, or, you don't have to pay for anything. Unless you do. No, I'm joking. You don't have to pay to watch the Full Send podcast. But what you do have to pay for is the Sidemen podcast. Now, I already went over the What's Good podcast with Mini Mentor, who is in the Sidemen, and Randolph, who isn't. But the Sidemen podcast is behind a paywall. Ooh, we love paying money. If you don't know what Side Plus is by now, you probably live in a hole in the middle of nowhere. But to those of you who do live in a hole in the middle of nowhere, Side Plus is basically the Sidemen's Patreon. It's not on patreon.com. It is a website that the Sidemen made for themselves because they're a bunch of egotistical bastards. But for a price of, I think, $5.99 or $6.99, around there, you can listen to the Sidemen podcast, the first official Sidemen podcast. You can see behind the scenes, uncensored videos. And when they initially launched Sidemen Plus, you could get a t-shirt by signing up. And by the way, if you own that t-shirt, you are the biggest nerd on the planet. You are able to find clips of these podcasts, even though they're behind a paywall, on TikTok. But not from, fans or whatever, from the official Side Plus account. posting them on TikTok with, funny fan edits. And me personally, I don't think the Sidemen need any more money than they already have. So putting it behind a paywall seems a bit scummy just to listen to you talk. The whole thing of, uncensored videos, I kind of get a lot of channels do that, where you have a Patreon or something where you can see uncensored videos. But to have your podcast behind a paywall where you just chat utter to your mates, I don't see the point, and I don't see why anyone would listen to that. Again, I don't hate the Sidemen. I watch them quite frequently. If they post a Sidemen Sunday, I'll watch it, even though the recent ones have been a bit poo-poo. And I think the reason that these podcasts have been rising so much is because of Andrew Tate. Now, that might sound like a weird take, but really, Andrew Tate started a podcast known as Tate Speech. I covered it way back in my channel. It's one of my first commentary style videos. I don't think you should watch it. It's not very good. But still, I covered it in that video. And in that video, I mentioned that he has a podcast. And in that podcast, he just chats about the metaverse and he just waffles for an hour. But I think him doing that and Andrew Tate's massive influence on people, making this generation of the internet as unsufferable as possible, has made people want to start a podcast just to be like their hero, Big Daddy Tate. I'm actually honestly surprised Aiden Ross hasn't started. Actually, wait, no, I shouldn't say his name. If not, this video will get copyright striked. Oh no, I'm just kidding. Aiden Ross, you know who he is. I'm surprised he hasn't started a podcast just to be like his daddy Tate. But I do feel like Andrew Tate is kind of at fault for making all of these people do podcasts. Also, it brings light, him going on all of these podcasts, because what most celebrities do when they become celebrities, out of nowhere, they blow up, they go on a parade of podcasts. They go on every podcast imaginable. And Andrew Tate did this, and I feel like him doing that gave light to these podcasts who really have nothing to say and are just not special at all. And there is a trend with podcasts that Andrew Tate also shine light on, is having women on them. Now, a podcast done by women, I have no problem with, go queen. But a podcast where there's 2 male hosts and then a bunch of females who they bring on to give opinions about is pretty weird. There is a clip that I saw in a Moist Critical video, it will be linked down below or whatever, but it is about a podcast host who had a bunch of girls on and asked them to rate him on a scale of attractiveness, just physical, 1 to 10. And he got so pissed for no reason. One girl rated him a 2, and he asked her to leave because he thought that she was rating him on an argument that they had before.
I would say 9.
All right. What about you over there? Go.
2.
Okay.
I would give him a 9.
Okay. What is she over there?
I would give him a 10 because he
Okay.
invited me.
All right. So again, you sound like a stupid ass bitch. I'm trying
Thank
to figure
you.
out why you rated me a 2 because we're not going off our interactions. We're going off beauty.
I don't
Right.
like lights.
I don't give a fuck. He's light skinned just like me. And you just gave him a 9. You gave me a 2. You only gave me a 2 because of the whole interaction that we've been having, right? So do me a favor, get the fuck up and get the fuck out.
Thank you.
Yeah, get out.
I do recommend you watch the Moist Critical video because it is very good. He goes more into depth than I will. Speaking of Moist Critical and that circle of, daily slop YouTubers, Pyrocynical and Ludwig, who both do daily slop videos, Mogul Mail and Pyro Live, they both have podcasts. You probably know the Ludwig podcast, The Yard, and I tried watching that podcast. It is... wow. Whoever watches that podcast, you are a tough soul. And Pyrocynical has the To Be Honest podcast, which is actually pretty good. And I'm not just saying that because I am a Pyrocynical fanboy and I love him so much and I really want to meet him. Pyro, I love you. Please please notice me. Pyro, please. Pyrocynical, please notice me. They both had podcasts on their own, and there isn't anything too, harsh about those podcasts. And also, Moist Critical has a podcast. I'm not too sure what it's called. The name will probably be here or here or down here or here. But it is... I haven't listened to it, but I'm sure it's fine. And going back on the point of having girls on podcasts, there's one podcast that you probably know that I was going to talk about, where there's this clip of this pretty large lady, and you know what, I'll just let this clip speak for itself.
I go to UCSB and I also bartend.
If you've ever been on the internet, you probably know that clip, and it's from a podcast with a bunch of women who just speak their mind, they speak about what's going on in girls. I think there are males on the podcast. I don't know if it's their podcast, but I think there are, dudes on there. But with all of that, I'm done. I really have nothing else to say. This was a rant video, so sorry about that. But trust me, there is a big video coming soon. You can expect it in about 1 or 2 weeks. And trust me, it's gonna change the course of this channel forever. A new wave, a new form of Puuwks is coming soon. Get ready. See ya.